I want to bring in now CBS News foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan, who's actually at the State Department. Margaret, we're getting word that President Obama has spoken to Secretary of State John Kerry. Have you heard that? And do you know any details of that conversation?
Yes, I've been trying to stay in contact with many diplomats right now. The White House just said in a statement, kind of an unusual one, reading out a phone call that President Obama just had with Secretary of State John Kerry, who right now is in Moscow. And it was an interesting choice. The White House says that the U.S. agrees that the U.S. must support the democratically elected government of Turkey. That means the U.S. is putting its thumb on the scale in favor of Erdogan's government. Now, they are emphasizing that this is because he is technically democratically elected, and that process must be respected. They had been talking about this in terms of it being an uprising. Right now, it is still not clear who is in charge, and American diplomats aren't clear on a lot of the ins and outs of what's happening on the ground. They're trying to get a clear read, but what they're most focused on, they say, and the Secretary of State emphasized this in the statement we saw, is the security of Americans. The U.S. Embassy has been trying to get Americans to stay indoors, shelter in place, because they are hearing explosions and shots fired, both in the capital of Ankara and in Istanbul as well.
President Erdogan of Turkey has been in power for more than a decade, Margaret. What's been the relationship with the White House? Is this a guy that a White House supported and liked?
Well, that's what's so interesting about this statement, to say that the U.S. is supporting the democratically elected government of Turkey, yet the U.S. consistently criticizes Erdogan for not upholding democratic values, for cracking down on any critics, on journalists, on in many ways being selective perhaps in his choice of cracking down on extremists and not being as rigorous as they would have liked in controlling that porous border with Syria. There's been a lot of criticism that Turkey let too many extremists get too strong over the years by not manning the gates more strongly. So to say that the U.S. is endorsing his government is a strong choice by the U.S. It's an interesting one, but it shows really what the U.S. view here is that Turkey is a key partner in the fight against ISIS. The U.S. needs that airbase at Incirlik in order to continue to carry out airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Turkey is also a member of NATO. That means that the U.S. is required militarily to help protect it. It's part of Europe. I mean, Turkey is really at the center of so much U.S. strategy right now that having instability in this country could be a real problem for a lot of national security priorities.
And Margaret, as you know, there are military bases, U.S. military bases stationed all throughout Turkey. Is the U.S., is the White House concerned about those bases? Any concern there? And also, what are they saying about U.S. personnel who are on the ground?
Well, in the conversations I've been having so far, we've been hearing from the Pentagon. They're emphasizing that the security at that Incirlik air base is secure. There is no threat right now. There had been a brief pause in airstrikes and the ability to use that air base, but that is not affected right now. We are assured of that, according to U.S. sources. So right now that seems secure. That is a top priority, but the stability within the country, I mean, depending on how this plays out in the next few days, it really could impact, in many ways, U.S. interests in this region. But I should also emphasize, don't forget, Turkey has also been the victim very recently of what is believed to be an ISIS attack, many extremist attacks over the last few months. And so it is in many ways vulnerable, and the U.S. is concerned about where Turkey sits in the region. They need it because it's such a conduit between East and West.
Margaret, I'm curious about what the term is that the White House is using. Are they calling this a military coup, or is it just uprising, as you had mentioned?
Well, in the language that I've seen from diplomats, they've called it an uprising, not a coup. Coup is a loaded term in diplomatic circles because it has actual legal ramifications for what the U.S. can and cannot do in terms of providing military support. That's some nitty-gritty there, so they're always careful about how they choose their words. But they're also calling it that because they're not sure who's in charge. It's been very difficult to get in contact, I should say, with people inside of Erdogan's government to get a clear read on what is happening. But he remains, Erdogan, I'm told, the democratically elected leader of the country, and the U.S. would like him to remain so, though they do not believe that he has been upholding democratic values.
UK, our Margaret Brennan, who started her day off at the White House and switched gears working the diplomatic track from the State Department. Margaret, thank you for that update and that report.